Top 10 most shocking WrestleMania match outcomes. For as long as I have been a WWE fan, stretching all the way back to 1986, early 87, and all of the WrestleMania shows that I've ever watched, which is all of them, I had never actually been to a WrestleMania before at this point. I was in the basement of Madison Square Garden a few days before WrestleMania 10, meeting Vince McMahon and Shawn Michaels and Tatanka and Ted DiBiase and Fred Blassie and Lou Albano and all of these people at the very first fan festival that they ever did. But we couldn't afford tickets to the actual WrestleMania show, so I watched it at my grandparents' house. WrestleMania 20, I don't know. I just opted not to go. I don't know why. So here I am, right? A New Yorker my entire life, and didn't go to either one of those WrestleManias. And I finally get to go to my very first WrestleMania in Miami. Not a bad place to be. That was WrestleMania 28. And number 4 on my list is Daniel Bryan defending the World Heavyweight title against Sheamus, the winner of the 2012 Royal Rumble. Not counting pre-show matches, this was the very first live WrestleMania match in person that I ever saw. And it was over before I could say, what the hell just happened? Now, the year before, to really get the full scope of the story here, you got to go back 1 year earlier. Bryan and Sheamus were scheduled to wrestle for the United States Championship at WrestleMania 27. They got bumped off the card. In his book, you can get Daniel Bryan's book for free. You can use our Audible trial. audibletrial.com/Solomonster. There's the link again. But you read Bryan's book when he talks about this, you could feel the frustration from him in getting bumped off the main card to a dark match, and a 3-minute one at that. 3-minute dark match. And then having to sit in the back during WrestleMania that year and watch Snooki wrestle. And watch Michael Cole wrestle Jerry Lawler. By the way, I use that word wrestle very lightly when it comes to those two cases. He's got to sit in the back and watch this nonsense. He and Sheamus both found out about what had happened with their match being bumped in the middle of a talent meeting backstage at Raw 6 days before WrestleMania. Nobody pulled him aside in private and said, hey guys, listen, sorry. They found out about it like everybody else did in the middle of this meeting. They did not even bother to just privately pull them aside and give them the bad news. Say, hey, look, I know we were advertising this, which they were. They were already advertising the match for the main show, but you guys got bumped. So they find out about it in this meeting. Sheamus is just distraught. He was on the WrestleMania card the year before against Triple H. Now he's not even on the show. Bryan half expected to be bumped off anyway. And in the book, he does acknowledge, he does say, look, WrestleMania is a spectacle. It is not a wrestling show. William Regal once told him, he said, wrestling is what you did before this. Anything you do after is a bonus. He understood that. Didn't do a whole lot to make him feel better, but he understood that. Now, flash forward a few months. Bryan wins Money in the Bank in what you could call, I guess, the summer of Punk. The second summer of Punk. 2005, I guess, would be the first summer of Punk in Ring of Honor. After that, he's the Money in the Bank winner. What does he do? He goes to SummerSlam. He loses to Wade Barrett. I don't even think he made it on to the next couple of pay-per-views that came after that. He told me when I interviewed him before WrestleMania the following year that WWE didn't even fly him in to some of the shows. The Vengeance pay-per-view where Mark Henry and Big Show broke the ring, there were fans chanting and waiting for him to come out and cash in his briefcase, and he said he couldn't because he was sitting at home in Vegas. They never even flew him into the show. But at this point, he had claimed on television in Storyline he was going to wait until WrestleMania to cash in his Money in the Bank. That's what he said. And then at the TLC pay-per-view in December, he changed his mind. He went back on his word, like any good heel, and he cashed in on Big Show to win his very first world title in WWE. Now, WrestleMania 28 comes along here. It's going to be Daniel Bryan and Sheamus for the World Heavyweight title. You open WrestleMania here, not only with a world title match, which they did that at least once before with Edge and Alberto Del Rio, so it's not like it's the first time that's ever happened. This might have been the second time. Not only that, but you opened the show with the winner of the Royal Rumble? I mean, there was no way, there was no chance in hell that Sheamus was going to be headlining WrestleMania the same year as Rock versus Cena. But it's laughable how they pass it off as, oh, you're winning a trip to the main event of WrestleMania, and then the man ends up curtain jerking the pay-per-view. But they really didn't stand a chance that year. They had Rock against Cena. You had Undertaker and Triple H. End of an era. Hell in a Cell. Not sure what era ended since they ended up having a bunch of more matches, but end of an era, Hell in a Cell. And you also had Chris Jericho on that card challenging CM Punk for the WWE title, which had a decent build to it at least. Bryan and Sheamus had no build. Sheamus won the Royal Rumble. He picked Daniel Bryan. He wanted to challenge him for the world title. And that was it. That was the story. So, it really, looking back, should not have been much of a surprise that they got slotted where they did. But it was a surprise to the two of them. 2 weeks before the show, Chris Jericho goes over to Bryan backstage. He goes, hey, are you guys having a really short match? Bryan had no idea what he's talking about. He had figured, no, we're going to be wrestling for the world title. We should probably be getting at least 20, 25 minutes. Jericho says, well, I was in the writer's room and I saw in the listing, they had you guys listed for 8 minutes, which after entrances, it's not 8 minutes. It's more like 5 minutes, or it's not 8. So Bryan goes, he finds Arn Anderson, the newly unemployed Arn Anderson, to find out what's going on here. And Arn wasn't sure. He said, look, you guys should be getting 25 to 30 minutes. You're in the world title match. And Bryan says, great, that's perfect. That's what I thought. Because the two of them, they were looking for redemption here after what had happened to them the year before. So about a week goes by. Arn finds Bryan, pulls him aside and says, listen, I got bad news. You guys are having a one-move match. Bell's going to ring. You're going to kiss AJ. Lee, not Styles. The gay community? And then Sheamus is going to kick you in the face and pin you. He and Sheamus were furious. So was Arn. He said Arn was just as pissed off as they were. Even the day of the show when the match was over at WrestleMania, Bryan said Great Khali came up to him in the back in his broken English and just goes, what happened? This is bullshit. What happened? I wish I could have been there to see that. So now it's WrestleMania weekend in Miami. I got to sit down with Bryan 2 days before. He was the first person they brought over for interviews that morning. Ironically, the second person they brought over that morning for interviews was Kofi Kingston. I mean, here we are now 7 years later. But he told the same story to me about being left off the WrestleMania card with Sheamus the year before, and then he said, if I retain my title at WrestleMania, I'm going to push to have them create a hemp belt for me to wear. That's some long-term booking right there. That is some heavy foreshadowing, let me tell you. So then we get to the match itself, WrestleMania 28, and they open the show, and Bryan is in one corner, Sheamus is in the other corner, yes signs all over the place, the fans are going crazy, mainly for Bryan. They're going nuts. They're pumped. They're ready for this. Bell rings, Bryan puts his arms out, says, wait, hold on a second. He motions for AJ Lee to get up on the apron. She gets up on the apron. He plants a wet one on her. And as soon as he turns around, he gets brogue kicked right in the face. He eats a brogue kick. To this day, we're in 2019 now. This was 2012. I have to say that the brogue kick remains one of the most protected finishes in the entire company. Very rarely, if ever, have I seen... I mean, it's happened, I guess. It's had to have happened before, but rarely do you see somebody get brogue kicked where Sheamus then goes for the pin and doesn't get it. When he kicked Bryan in the face, everybody should have known it was over. I'm just watching this. I'm stunned. I'm going, wait, what the hell's going on here? He covers him. 1, 2, 3. And everybody goes nuts. I'm sitting up in the press box. We were able to move our seats later in the show. We actually were... We ended up sitting in the friends and family section. So The Rock's mom is there, and all these Samoan-looking people are there. We had great seats at WrestleMania that year. We're up in the press box, and I'm looking down at this, and there are photos of me sitting in the press box, and I have this look on my face like I just saw a ghost. I'm like, what the fuck just happened? Are you kidding me? I was looking forward to that match a lot. And 18 seconds later, like that, it was over. I was angry. The crowd didn't seem very angry. I'm sure there were pockets of people who were pissed off, but you look at the way that crowd reacted, they exploded. Everybody went nuts for the finish. And a funny thing happened. It succeeded in being a launching pad for the whole Yes movement. Even if that wasn't what WWE had intended, and I'm 100% sure it wasn't. Now, when I say launching pad for the Yes movement, the Yes chants were already there. If you watch the match back, there's tons of Yes signs in the first 10 rows. But the Yes thing after this just exploded. At Raw the next night, this was the same night that one of the biggest stars in the company made his grand return. Of course, I'm talking about Lord Tensai. No, Brock Lesnar also made his return to WWE that night after 8 years away, and that was kind of a big deal. But being in the building that night, it was the American Airlines Arena, and watching people lose their minds when Brock Lesnar came out and beat up John Cena, it was great. But the reaction for Daniel Bryan when the show was over, when they were off the air, they had a dark match, 6-man tag team dark match. The reaction for Bryan when his music hit and he came out was unlike anything I had ever seen before. Bryan, he was relegated that night to a single backstage segment on TV, and he didn't even speak. I think he stared down the announcer, never said a word. That was the extent. That was his role on Monday Night Raw, the night after WrestleMania. He was like EC3, but without the nice tan. So all of this other stuff here happened off the air. All these people are chanting yes in unison, throwing their fingers up into the air. I know that became commonplace, but this was the first time that we had really seen anything like this. And it's one of those kind of experiences you look back on and you just, from the bottom row, the front row, to the very top of the nosebleeds, everybody just in unison. It was like this unbelievable thing I had not seen before. Unless you were at like a soccer game or something. I'm talking like at WWE shows, right? You'll have a guy who comes out like Brock did that night or Stone Cold back in the day. Every fucking night Stone Cold would come out. Still to this day, nobody got pops like Steve Austin. You know, but he would get like a big reaction. Everybody would be cheering and taking pictures and putting up the middle finger. But this was just a different type of reaction where everybody just seemed to be in sync behind this guy. A heel, 5'8", never did anything of any note with this guy. He's a heel, not a babyface. And you look out into this crowd and it's like, what the hell's going on here? And I'm looking in the ring. Big Show's already in the ring. Randy Orton's already in the ring. They're looking at each other. They're laughing. They're looking at the crowd and the reaction like, you know, what is this? Like, I've been here for years. I've never gotten a reaction like this before. We've been here how many years? We've never got this kind of response. But it was Big Show, Randy Orton, and Sheamus against Daniel Bryan, Kane, and Cody Rhodes. And of all the people to take the losing fall, naturally, who was it? Daniel Bryan. Pinned by Sheamus. What else is new? But looking back, you know, that 18-second loss did more to turn Daniel Bryan into a main event player than any wrestling match he had ever had up to that point in WWE. 2 years later, he was standing there with 2 belts and a confetti bath to close out WrestleMania. Funny enough, Vince McMahon's original plan for WrestleMania 30 was to have Daniel Bryan wrestle Sheamus. 5th from the top, at best. It's like Groundhog Day with these two. But WWE not booking Bryan in the Royal Rumble match that year turned the fans against Batista through no fault of his own. They shit all over him. He became Bootista and then Bluetista. And now he's Give Me What I Want Batista. But that screwed up their plans. And then, of course, CM Punk walking out the next day really screwed up their plans. So Daniel Bryan ended up being the beneficiary of some very bizarre circumstances that put him in the main event of WrestleMania. But his match at WrestleMania 28, that really was the catalyst for it all. And the finish of that match was genuinely shocking. As somebody who was there and who felt it amongst all the people cheering, they were stunned because nobody saw that finish coming that night.